then they can join us at that point. But I do see many of the taxing bodies represented here. So if we could call the meeting to order.
Kane County,
Mark Armstrong here.
do we have someone from Dundee Township? Elgin Community College, District number 509.
Yes, Heather Scholl.
Community Unit School District number 300. Dundee Township Park District.
Here, Dave Peterson.
The East Dundee and Countryside Fire Protection District.
Here, Jason Martha.
And the Fox River Valley Public Library District.
Lauren Rosenthal here.
Thank you.
At this point, we need to appoint a public member, and I'm not sure there's anybody here. Greg, maybe you can advise that could be appointed as the public member.
Sure. So the TIF Act provides that the Joint Review Board, should appoint a public member if one steps forward. Is there anyone here who is eligible to serve as a public member for this Joint Review Board, meaning that they're a resident of the Village of East Dundee? I note that no one resides within the area proposed to be designated as a TIF district. If there is no one who is eligible to serve as a public member, you can move on to the next agenda item. Okay. It appears that no one is eligible to serve as a public member for this Joint Review Board. So in that case, I suggest that the JRB move on to the next agenda item.
Okay, we will need to appoint a chairperson of the JRB. I am willing to do that as I've called this meeting and I'm walking you through the JRB process. If we so have a motion for that.
Mark Armstrong, so moved.
Second.
And then a roll call
Okay.
vote should be taken.
Mark Armstrong,
Mark Armstrong, yes.
Heather Scholl,
Yes.
Dave Peterson,
Yes.
Chief Jason Parson,
Yes.
and Lauren Rosenthal.
Yes.
And then Ms. Johnson, as the village's representative, should also be called for a vote on this one.
Okay, I'm sorry. Administrator Johnson.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, agenda item number 5, overview of the statutory duties. Do you want to speak to this, Greg, first?
Yes, I can make some comments here. My name is Greg Smith. I'm the village attorney for the Village of East Dundee, and I have some brief prepared comments explaining what the role of the Joint Review Board is for you this morning. And then I'm happy to answer any questions about that now or later in the meeting when they come up. The statutory duties of this Joint Review Board are to review the public record, planning documents, and proposed ordinances, approving the redevelopment project area, plan and project documents, and in particular, the eligibility report that were sent to each of the taxing districts in the lead up to this meeting. Copies of the draft ordinances were provided to you with a copy of the agenda today, so you've had the opportunity to review them. Pursuant to the Illinois TIF Act, the JRB must submit a written report or recommendation to the village regarding the eligibility report, the proposed boundaries of the TIF district. This is for the South Illinois Route 72 TIF district and its redevelopment plan and project that you'll be hearing more about in a couple minutes from the village's TIF consultant. The JRB's report needs to be approved by a majority vote of those JRB members present and voting. The report is due within 30 days after convening the first Joint Review Board meeting for this TIF district, which is by August 28th of 2020. The JRB's report will either approve or reject the proposal of the village, and the JRB's decision, if per the statute, needs to be based on whether or not the eligibility report, the proposed redevelopment project area for the TIF district, and the redevelopment plan and project satisfy the requirements and objectives of the TIF Act. As I noted a minute ago, the village's TIF consultant will take you through those matters in a few minutes. If no report or recommendation is filed with the village board by the joint review board within the first 30-day period, which begins today, the TIF Act creates a presumption that the JRB has recommended approval of the TIF district. The decision of the JRB in any event is non-binding and is only a recommendation to the village board. If the JRB recommends that the TIF district not be created, the village will then have 30 days from the date of that decision to address the reasons that the JRB has put forward and either resubmit an amended revised redevelopment plan and project or resubmit the current plan and project. During this additional time period, village representatives must meet and confer with the JRB and attempt to resolve any issues raised by the JRB in its first written report. If the village and JRB are unable to resolve the differences during this second period of time, and the JRB again votes to recommend that the TIF not be created, the village may proceed with creating the TIF district only upon a 3/5 vote of its corporate authorities, which means 5 of the 7 members of the village board, as opposed to a simple majority of 4 of 7 members of the village board if the JRB is in support of it. Finally, after the JRB is done with the matters currently before it regarding creation, you will continue to meet on an annual basis if the village creates this TIF district. I note that I believe it was July 13th in the last 2 weeks or so. Much of this group met to discuss the other TIF districts that the village has active at this time, so most of you are familiar with that process. Happy to answer any questions at this time. Otherwise, I would turn it back over to the chair.
Are there any questions for the village attorney about the JRB process? Okay, there being none, I'll move on to agenda item number 6, which is the purpose is to walk you through the memorandum that I've included in your packet explaining why we're here today, the background, the eligibility report, and the project at hand. I did have the opportunity to introduce this project at the annual JRB meeting, which covered the other villages tax increment financing districts. So I will try not to go into too much detail because I think most of you were in attendance at the time, but I will hit the highlights. Basically, as indicated in the background, the reason why we're discussing this creation of this 2-parcel TIF, it's what Attorney Smith likes to call a micro TIF, is we are unable to incorporate the TIF or this property into another TIF, which specifically we were looking at the Dundee Crossings TIF district. That would have been our preference. The reason why we feel that there are TIF incentives required to develop this land is it has been undeveloped land, unincorporated, and owned by Plody Properties for a very long time. It's immediately adjacent to the former Walmart property. In total, this property and additional land is about 75 acres that Plody owns. This land was used for farming. The adjacent land was and is using for a quarry site. So the land is basically missing the critical infrastructure needed for development. And as such, incentivizing the development is a requirement in order to bring something to the community. We did look at all of our options as far as incentivizing, and we are looking at expanding our BDD, which will give the developer additional sales tax, but the TIF is a requirement in order to make this work. We've reviewed the pro forma and the costs, which we feel are both on-site and off-site costs are extraordinary in order to bring the development to the village. As noted in the memo, this also included an annexation. So until recently, the property was not annexed into the village. So annexing into the village allowed them to utilize the TIF and the BDD tools that would not have otherwise been available under the unincorporated. So we do expect a significant EAV growth for this relatively small TIF. The project at hand only includes the development of one of these parcels, which is 23 acres. So there'll be a remaining 12 acres incorporated into the TIF. And that was at the request of Plody because they would like to continue the development to the greatest extent possible. And of course, we would want to see that. Another exciting part about this project is it creates a fourth leg to the Christina Drive and Route 72 intersection. For 3 years, we've been working with IDOT on a signal there for the benefit of Speedway and the Terra Business Park. The village has received a $2 million grant from IDOT. There's been many delays with related to processing through IDOT, but we do see that project coming. And so this would be the fourth leg of that intersection, which would really round out the development in this area and spur future growth. As reported at our last JRB meeting, the village has had almost 50% growth in EAV since the recession in 2014. So the village is using their TIF tools wisely to grow EAV, and as a result, the taxing bodies will see revenue growth upon the completion of the TIF district. So we are excited about this project. I hope you are too. It does not have a residential impact. That's a priority for us. We would not be looking to create a new TIF for that, that creates that burden on some of the other taxing bodies like the school and like the library. So we think this is a good one. It results in development, it results in EAV growth, and it's happening during the time of the coronavirus, which many development is on hold, and there's a lot of fear and panic created in the industry. So for us to be able to move a project forward is very good news for us and speaks volumes about the village and about our partners. Right now, I want to turn this over to Scott Harrington from Vanderwall and Associates so he can walk us through the eligibility criteria needed to create this TIF.
Thanks, Jennifer. This TIF is really unlike any other TIF that the village has done, in that this will be an industrial park conservation area. As Jennifer indicated, we did look to see if we couldn't simply include this within the existing Dundee Crossing TIF, but the property did not qualify. Under the Illinois statute, including farmland or property that's been used for commercial agricultural purposes in the recent past, is very difficult to put into a tax increment district. One way, really the only way to do that, is through an industrial park conservation area. And the primary qualification for that is that the municipality is deemed to be a labor surplus municipality. Under that, there are two criteria. One is that the unemployment rate has to exceed 6%, and the other is that it has to equal or exceed the national average. With the COVID situation, we meet both of those criteria, and the statute says that we only need to meet that for 1 month in the 6 months prior to creating the TIF, and we now see that 2 months in a row. So that condition was documented in both April and May, and I suspect that we'll probably see that in June as well. The unemployment numbers by county for the state aren't typically released till almost the end of the month following the month. So sometime this week, we would expect to see the June number. And again, I think we'll definitely see it above 6%, and more than likely equal or above the national average. In the packet that Jennifer provided, we included a table that showed the unemployment rate in King County over the last year and a half, comparing it both with the national average and with the state average. And I think with the exception of maybe 1 or 2 months, it exceeded the state average and national average consistently, and even way back at the beginning of last year, exceeded 6% and would have qualified us as a labor surplus municipality at that time. So you all live in the county, work in the county, and are aware of some of its economic struggles. So I'm sure a lot of this isn't news to you. And this tool was really put in place to try to help that. And As a result, this TIF is exclusively really for industrial purposes, to create jobs and to create high-paying jobs. And as indicated in the TIF report and in the attachments that were provided by Eltafor, who's the Caterpillar dealer, there'll be quite a few jobs created, and some, and most frankly, at a fairly high wage rate. So it's an excellent addition to the county's employment, which is really what we think the statute was intended to do. I should add that we're under the statute, East Dundee qualifies as a labor surplus municipality, even though there aren't unemployment records that are exclusive to the village. When that is the case, then the county average is used, and that's what we're using in this case, are those for King County. The other two requirements are, one, that it be industrial. After it was annexed, it was zoned industrial and would remain so for the life of the district, and that includes the additional Plody parcel that Jennifer mentioned, so that when it develops, it also would fall under that zoning. And then the other part is that we abut an area deemed to have been blighted, and we abut the Dundee Crossing District both to the west and to the north. So those are the three primary eligibility criteria, and we meet all three in that case. And again, while we only need to exceed the unemployment in 1 month in the 6 months preceding adoption, which is scheduled for October, we're probably going to end up seeing that condition perhaps within all 6 months, probably at least 3. Before I go on in terms of the TIF plan itself, just are there any questions about the eligibility? Okay. So beyond this different eligibility and these other kind of requirements of being exclusively industrial, the rest of the TIF plan is pretty much the same as what you have seen for the other districts within East Dundee. Only a couple of small differences. One is that where an annexation is involved, we're required to provide the terms of that annexation agreement, and attached to the document was in fact the full annexation agreement for your review, as well as the developer agreement. So the amount of information provided with this district exceeds what typically is required to be provided with the other districts in terms of what the end user is going to be and what the terms of the deal are, if you will, between the village and the developer, in this case, the business. Also to be included are some information about the project itself in terms of what it consists of and the number of employees. So those were summarized in the TIF document, but those are included in much more detail in both the annexation agreement and the development agreement. And I'm sure either Greg or Jennifer could answer any questions you have about those particular documents. It is pretty small, or a micro TIF, I guess, as Greg and Jennifer are calling it, with just 2 parcels. The projected EAV for the Eltafor facility, I think, is $3 million. Plody property is about the same size, maybe a little bit smaller. So we could maybe see development of about the same amount occur there. Both parcels that are involved currently have ag exemptions on them, so their valuation is extremely low and the amount of taxes that they're paying are extremely low. So by taking this out of agriculture, putting it into industrial all by itself is going to enhance the value of the property, and of course the development that much more so. So we're seeing significant growth in tax base, and the fact that there will not be any residential within this district, then the impacts on most of the taxing districts should be pretty minimal. I think that's, I'll kind of stop there and just see if there are any questions or anything that people would like me to go over in more depth.
Okay, well, thank you, Scott. That was a good description of the eligibility criteria. I guess at this time, I would ask for discussion or any further questions from myself, Scott, or Attorney Smith prior to making a recommendation. It sounds like there's no further questions, so you either hate the TIF or we did a really good job explaining to you everything you need to know. So is there anyone who would feel comfortable generating a motion to make a recommendation to the East Dundee Village Board and President regarding the creation of the Illinois Route 72 TIF?
Jason Harrison makes the motion to go ahead with the TIF.
Thank you,
second that.
Carson.
Lauren Rosenthal from the library.
Thank you, Lauren. Okay, it sounds like we have a motion and a second to recommend the creation of the South Illinois Route 72 Tax Increment Financing District. Attorney Smith, is there anything else we need in that motion?
No, the recommendation is for approval. It's been made and seconded. The chair will draft, sign, and forward that recommendation, and the members of the JRB will get a copy of it after it's been signed and forwarded to the village board.
Okay, great. Do we need a roll call vote on that then?
Yes,
Is there
because we're
discussion on the
virtual.
motion first? Mark Armstrong, is there discussion on the motion?
I recommend it. Yes, yeah, absolutely.
I don't have any concerns about the motion. There were some references written in the documents you provided to valuations made by the Kane County assessor. There is no such office. What you're probably looking for is the Dundee Township assessor. Unlike Cook County, Kane County has a supervisor of assessments, as does the other 99 downstate counties that don't have the Cook County system. But I don't think that needs to change the motion. Just note for your records going forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that correction.
Catherine, can you?
At least
call
now
the
you know
roll?
I read it.
Thank you for reading it, Mark.
In my experience, Mr. Armstrong always carefully reads these TIF documents. Yeah.
Okay, roll call vote. Mark Armstrong,
Armstrong, yes.
Heather Schall,
Yes.
Dave Peterson,
Yes.
Chief Carson,
Yes.
and Lauren Rosenthal.
Yes.
I think you have to call me Catherine also.
Oh, I'm sorry. And Administrator Johnson?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, motion carries. We will forward that recommendation to the East Dundee Village President and Board of Trustees. And if I could have a motion, oh, I just realized I skipped public comments. Are there any public comments?
Yeah, I think, Chair, you did call for any comments between the presentation by yourself and Mr. Harrington and the JRB's motion, and no one stepped up at that time.
Okay, can I get a motion to adjourn then, please?
Armstrong, so moved.
Is there a second?
Heather Scholl, second.
Okay. Mark Armstrong,
Armstrong, yes.
Heather Schall,
Yes.
Dave Peterson,
Yes.
Chief Carson,
Yes.
Lauren Rosenthal,
Yes.
and Administrator Johnson.
Yes. Okay, so adjourn. Thank you so much for all your time. Try to get outside today. It looks beautiful, at least sunny. Take care.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.